I'd like to just acknowledge some people that have helped out putting this conference together. So if you wouldn't mind standing, if you've helped serve on any of the planning committees, please stand. If you volunteered in any way, please stand. If you're a pastor of a church who invested time and money in the conference, please stand. And if you donated any funds to putting this conference together, I'd like you to stand as well too, please. So, all right, let's give them a round of applause. Skip's pretty humble. He helped out with the conference, so thank you, bro. Yep. So a few years ago, for me it was a few years ago. For Dave, it was more realistic, about 8 years ago. Carrie and I were able to go to a Coach's Timeout conference, and actually Rick and Angie were there as well in Iowa City. And Aaron Campman spoke. The Ed Thomas Foundation was there and put the whole event on, which was amazing. But we heard this couple speak that we've never heard of before, Dave and Ann Wilson, and they just blew us away. It was an amazing getaway for Carrie and I, but it impacted our marriage. It helped us out a lot. His book has helped us tremendously in our marriage as well. And so I just thought, man, if we could ever get them to Grinnell someday, I don't know what it's going to take, but if anybody ever asked me, like, who should we have, that's going to be the first names that come out of my mouth. And so when we were talking with the pastors about what we should do, they gave their suggestions on things that they had heard of in the past, and I'm like, nope, Dave and Ann Wilson. And we got them. So we're so thankful that that Dave could be here with us today. And one of our family movies that we have loved and quoted so many times in our home is Pure Luck. Martin Short, Danny Glover. That movie describes our family pretty well. We call it Smith Luck in our home. It always seems like something happens, and so everywhere we go, something happens, whether at the register or we always hear this phrase, "This has never happened to us before." And so Dave texted me yesterday. He's been a pastor, a chaplain, a musician, and all these things, and spoken for 20 plus years at conferences. And so I get this text that his wife is sick, and the reply was, "This has never happened before." So if there's anyone to blame today, we'll just go with the Smith Luck. But so thankful. I had an opportunity to bring Dave from the airport last night, and just a wonderful conversation with him, just talking sports and God and how God is working in both of our lives. So we're thankful to have Dave here, and come on, brother, and just share your heart.
Thank you. I got a mic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've got one. Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, I didn't know this was your Pure Luck thing when I texted you yesterday. I felt so bad. My wife Ann and I were in Orlando yesterday. We do a radio show that's a podcast. I hope some of you listen to it. It's called Family Life Today. Anybody? Family Life Today has been a radio show for 29 years with Family Life Ministries by Bob Lepine and Dennis Rainey. I don't know if you know those names. And they've hosted that show for 29 years. And Dennis retired 2 years ago, so Ann and I came in the studio and replaced Dennis, and then Bob just retired. So now Dave and Ann do a radio show out of our studios in Orlando. And again, most people now don't listen to radio. It's like, how many of us watch a TV show at 8 o'clock on Monday night when it's on? Very few. So most of us listen to a podcast. So we were in the studio all last week interviewing guests that come in, authors on marriage and family. And on Monday, I am so sick, they won't let me in the studio with our guests. They put me on the other side of a window like I'm unclean, and it's, the world we're living in. I had a really bad cold, sort of bronchitis, and I had to go get a COVID test because, today you're guilty until you prove you're innocent, right? And I didn't have COVID. And Ann the whole time was saying, "You better not give this to me." And I'm like, "I'm not going to give it to you. You won't believe what happened." So Monday night, at like 10 o'clock at night, I'm like, I got to take some NyQuil. I'll never be able to sleep. So I go in the restroom. and I can't find a cup. I shouldn't even be telling you this, but I'm looking for a little paper cup to take some water, and so I look in the little closet in our bathroom, and there's Ann's, I didn't know what it was, but I'm like, there's no paper cups, but there's this glass full of ice and water in the closet. So I drink it, and I don't know why, I put it back in, and the next morning I see her drinking out of it, and I go, hey, don't drink out of that. She goes, you didn't. Trust me. We get mad sometimes in our marriage. Anybody else? I don't know what you wanted me to be, but I'm not your perfect marriage guy, okay? And so she starts yelling at me, you did not drink. I hid the cup in the closet so you wouldn't find it. I'm like, I was looking for a paper cup. So, and she's like, if I get sick. And so yesterday, she got it. And we were in the studio with Gary Thomas. You know Gary Thomas? He wrote Sacred Marriage. We interviewed him yesterday. And we're both in the studio with him. But as we were getting ready to go to the airport at 4 p.m., she kept getting sicker and sicker. And she's a college gymnast. I don't know if you know gymnasts. They're the toughest people in the universe. Nothing stops them. I am a wimp compared to her. So she's standing there. We are literally in the line to get on the gate. And I look over. Our eyes are closed. Her head is full. I'm like, you would not want to see her. Because I'm like, you are a germ. You cannot get on an airplane. I'm good. I'm like, you're not good. So I said, honey, you need to go home. She texts me, and she literally walks away. I walk on the plane, and she texts me 5 minutes later, told Nathan, she goes, I just threw up in a trash can on the way back to the terminal. I'm like, I am so glad you're not with us. So I'm so sorry she's not with us, because this has never happened. We've done marriage conferences for 35 years around the country. I've never done one without her. I've done weekend sermons as a pastor without her, but I've never done one without her. So here's what I'm doing. I'm bringing her in on video. On every talk, I've got at least one video of her and I doing stuff together. If you've ever picked up our book, Vertical Marriage, or if you've ever seen Vertical Marriage Small Group, anybody done that? It's this book in a 5-session video small group. If you need something afterwards, get it and go through it. So some of the stuff that we have on that video, I'm gonna let you, because she's the best. She's 10 times better than I am. And once you see a video of her, you're gonna go, yes, she is so good. The people at our church always told me this. This one lady came up to me and she goes, I was a pastor for 30 years. And she goes, when you're doing a marriage series or a relationship series, I'd be so excited to be sitting there with my husband. I see you walk on stage. I'm like, oh, good, Dave's speaking today. But I got to be honest, when I see you walk on stage with Ann, I turn to my husband and go, jackpot. So you're going to get a little bit of both of that. But here's just a little bit of our history, because you probably don't know us. 33 seasons. This is why I moved to Detroit from Ohio. I'm a Buckeye. Anybody? I've seen a couple Buckeyes. Yeah, and I lived in Michigan, so you can't even say Buckeye in Michigan. You get shot. So, but I moved to Detroit in 1985 to be the Detroit Lions chaplain, and I did that for 33 seasons. Now, you probably don't even know our record in 33 seasons, but a few years ago in our church, and I pastored for 30 years and started this church, and just in December went through succession. So I just stopped doing that, and now it's full-time. I'm doing with Family Life. But it's interesting, but a couple years ago, my assistant, Debbie, comes in, who Nathan's dealt with. She's the best. She comes in, she goes, hey, I got this strange email. Do you want me to read it to you? And I go, I don't know. What's strange about it? She said, well, I'll just read it to you. So she stands in my office, and it comes from some guy. We have 8 campuses at our church, so I don't even know this guy. He's at some other campus. And he just said, hey, Dave, just wanted you to know, I just did the research. This is official. You are the losingest chaplain in the history of the NFL. And I thought it was a joke. It's not a joke. I'm the losingest chaplain in the history of the NFL. And he had 317 losses, in 33 seasons. 1 playoff win with Barry Sanders back in 90. No, Barry. Yeah, Barry's there. Anyway, so that's my claim to fame. And I actually have 1 high school football record still as a high school and college quarterback in Ohio. Listen to this. I still hold, to this day, somebody told me last week, you still hold the longest touchdown pass ever thrown in an Ohio State playoff game, 97 yards. That's my 1 record, still standing 40 years. You think I'm pretty good, don't you? It was an interception. and it lost the game to Cincinnati Moeller. So anyway, we're not here to talk about football, although my son played at Central Michigan, and the last time I was in Iowa, we beat the Hawkeyes at Kinnick. Anybody remember that? You hate me now, but it was a fun day for Central Michigan, man. And my son is a receiver, and he got to play for the Lions for a little bit. So anyway, but all you women thinking, are you really going to talk about football all morning? No, I'm done, sort of. That will be it. But, as you talk about marriage, we've been married 41 years now. And when we got married, probably like most of you when you got married, we were so in love. Do you remember those days? Maybe you're in them now. Probably not, but maybe you're in them now where you're just so over the top in love with one another. You can't imagine ever not feeling what you're feeling in that moment. In fact, Jason mentioned, I grew up playing in bands. I was, when I was 7 or 8 years old, my grandma made me go to this movie I didn't want to go to, and I fell in love with music. I fell in love. In fact, this was the movie. See how old you are. See if you remember the song. This was the movie. Help, I need somebody help. Not just anybody help. I need someone. Oh, come on. Help. By the way, anybody what's coming out this week? The Beatles, Get Back? Anyway, if you don't know what I'm talking about, doesn't matter. But I went to that movie as a little 7-year-old and became a guitar guy and had bands. And I was the high school guitar guy who had I called it a bang. I just got up there and I flipped my little bang over. We had this band. But, when you think about music, there are so many great love songs, right? And I know we have different ages, so we know different music. But here's one from way back. This is a song like you're so in love, you just want to say, loving you. Remember this? It's easy because you're beautiful. Anybody want to sing? And every day of my life, come on, sing it. I'm filled with love for you. Do the la la la's. Here we go. La 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 la, la 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 la. I want to hear you. Really good. Do 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 do. Anybody? Yeah, anyway, so, you got these love songs where, think about that song, Loving You. I'm loving you because every day you're so beautiful. It's like, well, that's definitely pre-marriage. Because you don't always think that after you get married for a while. And then, here's my great love song. Remember this? Girl, you really got me now. You got me so I don't know what I'm doing. That's so romantic, isn't it, ladies? Yeah, right. Whatever. That's the Kinks and then Van Halen. But then, there's songs like, remember John Mayer? Here's an interesting love song. Your body is a wonderland. Your body is a wonderland. Yang, wow, wow, yang. I don't know what he says there, but, I'm not kidding. One day, I was in my office with my acoustic, and I was singing that song, and Ann walks by. She denies this, but it's true. She walks by, and I'm singing that, body, and she goes, hey, I could sing that song to you right now. And I go, really? She goes, yeah, it would go like, your body was a wonderland. That's what she said. It was pretty funny. But here's the thing. You're so in love, and you have all these great love songs, and here's what happens. Here's a more recent one, a few years back. Remember John Legend? All of me loves all of you, all your curves and all your edges, all your perfect imperfections. You hear those songs, you just put your arm around her, you're like, oh, right? But the truth is, you're married a while or you have some struggles, and if you were honest, you would be like, none of me loves any of you. All your quirks and accusations makes me want to die and go to hell. It's just like crazy, right? It's like all these different things. In fact, anybody country music? Brad Paisley, one of the best guitar players in the world. He had a song years ago. You talk about reality of marriage. It went like this. Well, I love her. Remember this one? But I love the fish. Spend all day out on this lake, and that was all I catch. Today she met me at the door, said I'd have to choose If I hit that fishing hole today, she'd be packing all her things and she'd be gone by noon. Remember the chorus? Well, I'm gonna miss her when I get home. Right now I'm on this lake shore and I'm sitting in the sun. Yeah, I'm sure it'll hit me when I walk through that door tonight. Yeah, I'm gonna miss her. Listen to this. And looky there, I got a bite. Anyway, so there's all this. You guys are nice, clapping for that. So, but that's the truth, isn't it? You have these high, amazing feelings, and it doesn't always stay that way. And Ann and I actually went to what Family Life calls their Weekend to Remember marriage getaways. They're all around the country. We were in college. I was a senior at Ball State University. Any Cardinals? Yeah, I didn't think so. So Ball State University. She was a freshman at University of Kentucky. We're getting married that spring in May, and I just given my life to Christ about a year before. Same for her. And our staff with Athletes in Action on the campus said, before you get married, you got to go to this marriage getaway. So we go there, and we're sitting in a ballroom with 1,000 couples, from married 50 years to pre-marrieds like us, and they walk you through God's game plan for marriage. And I'm not kidding. We sat there the whole weekend thinking, why do you need a marriage conference? I mean, this is going to be so easy. We love each other. We love Jesus. We're going into ministry together. We literally didn't take notes. We just looked around like, all these couples are like taking notes. Like, really? It can't be that hard. I mean, they must not love Jesus like we do, and they must not love each other like we do. I'm not kidding. The only thing that I remember writing in the manual, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but it's true, I drew a bed and stick figures of Ann and I in the bed, and I said, in 2 weeks, we get to do that. So, because we were saving ourselves for marriage, and it was like, that's all I cared about. Okay, am I that gross? But and she's like, yeah, 14 days, baby. So we didn't really take notes. So we get married 14 days later. I'm not going to talk about the stick figures in the bed, but, and we start our life together. And again, if you've read our book, you've heard all this, because the first 2 chapters are sort of this story. But 6 months later, we are driving to our first job as the chaplain of the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I guess they're not popular out here, But I used to be a chaplain for a winning program. But so we're driving to our first job. I'm 22. Again, she's 19. I actually had a little bit of hair. And all I remember about that drive is we are so disappointed in our marriage and one another. 6 months after the greatest day of our life, our wedding day. That quickly, it was downhill. And we are yelling in this car. Anybody ever been there? I know you don't have to raise your hand. Anybody been there this morning? That happens often on the way to a marriage retreat. Trust me, it does. If you had that isn't that uncommon, seriously. And let me say one last thing before I tell you the rest of the story. Marriage retreats don't change marriages. What you do after changes your marriage. You understand that, right? It's like going to the gym and listening to somebody talk about working out and then never working out. It won't change you. Yeah, I know how to use the machines. You better start using them and doing it, right? It's the same thing in marriage retreat. This will be catalytic, but I'm telling you, what matters is what happens tonight and tomorrow and building a rhythm in your marriage. Because this will be, I hope you go, this is excellent for our marriage, but what you do after really matters. So here, Ann and I are driving, and we are so disappointed. She literally yells. And again, if she's here with me, she just do it for you, but I'll pretend I'm Ann. She yells to me as I'm driving, marrying you was the biggest mistake of my life. That's what she said. Because, if you had asked her before we got married, and she said, people would ask me, what are the negative things about Dave Wilson? She says, none. He's awesome. She would tell you 6 months later, she could not think of one good thing about me. And so she yells that, and I yell back. I was very mature at the time. I yell back, you are exactly right. What were we thinking? We should annul this thing right now. As we're driving to our first ministry assignment. right? And then you won't believe this. Sometimes I don't share this story, but this is absolutely true. We're at Nebraska now. We're starting our ministry with college athletes, and it's still so bad. And we're fighting all the time. And guess what this first session is about? Conflict. Because it's that critical to know how to do it right. All of us know how to do it. Very few of us know how to resolve it. We didn't know how. And so we were fighting this one night again. And it's so bad, I just get out of bed at like 2 in the morning. She had fallen asleep. I go downstairs. We rented a $150 a month loft. Were those the days? And I had this little office. I remember I went in the little office. I sat on the floor. I opened the Bible, and I was reading. And I read a passage in Philippians 1. Some of you have heard it, where Paul says, to live is Christ, verse 21, to die is gain. It's like, man, if I'm going to live, it's Jesus. But if I die, it's awesome too, because now I'm with Jesus. So I'm reading that passage. And I literally pray these words: God, I'd rather be dead than married to her. That's where we were. Here's the thing I should have never done. She literally walks in after I prayed that prayer. She didn't hear me. She goes, hey, what are you doing? And she told me later when she walked in, she's like, oh, good, my man's in the Bible. Maybe that'll help, right? But she asked me, by the way, do not do what I did here. This is not prescriptive. This is something you shouldn't do. But she said, hey, so what are you doing? I literally look up at her and I go, oh, I'm just reading Paul's words, and I just prayed and said to God, I'd rather be dead than married to you. I said that to her. She goes, what? You know, and I thought, somebody told us before we got married, share every thought you ever have, no secrets. So I thought I'm doing the right thing, and she just looked at me like, that was something I should have never in my life said to her. But here's why you're laughing now. Some of you, Carrie's laughing. You're laughing now because we're on year 41. It's sort of funny now because we made it. But if we hadn't have made it, because I'm not kidding, I'm not sharing that just to be funny. I'm sharing to say, that's how desperate I was. I was like, this is so bad. We made a huge mistake. I come from 2 alcoholic parents who got divorced when I was 7. Ann has sexual abuse in her past. We had no idea. All that comes into your marriage. You know, as a pastor 30 years, I did thousands of weddings, and I'd look at this couple standing here, and I just wanted to say to them, it would ruin the wedding, but I never did. But I'd love to say to them, because they're just looking at each other, and it's just, you just want to go, you know, it's going to be really hard. And when you look at all the couples that's sitting out in church, they're all like, yeah, okay, wait, dude. You know, just wait a few months. And I always want to say to them, you know what's with you right now in this chapel? There's luggage. She's bringing it in. You're bringing it in. All the past, all the brokenness, it's all coming. You're going to have a great time figuring all that out. But that's what happens. And we didn't know that. And so there we were. And I'm telling you, God has a plan for your marriage that is absolutely incredible. And we've discovered it over the last 41 years. And we call it vertical marriage, and it simply means, and I'll explain a lot more of it really after lunch, but it simply means bringing God into your marriage, going vertical, not just horizontal, husband-wife, but bringing God and going vertical into your marriage. And when you understand what that means and then apply that to all aspects of your marriage, it changes everything. So this first session, and I don't know what you want to do, if you want to just listen or take notes, or take pictures of the notes that'll be up on the screen. I want to walk through this whole thing called conflict. And it's basically so important. I don't know if you've ever heard the name John Gottman. Anybody know that name? And I'm going to cough every once in a while, so sorry about that. You can tell I'm still just getting over this thing, and that doesn't mean I'm germ. You can come up and say hi to me. But John Gottman, not a Christian author or marriage guru, he's a guy that's very respected in the marriage arena because he does write and speak and teach on this. Actually a Jewish guy, but he's a guy, if you've ever heard of him, he sits with a married couple and watches them argue for 15 minutes, and then he will tell them if they're going to stay married or get divorced in a 15-minute argument. You want to guess what his accuracy rate is? Guess what his accuracy rate is on 15 minutes of watching a couple argue? 98%. Because he looks for patterns. He looks for things that we do when we have conflict that we don't even know we do. And if we don't understand this, it's not going to end well. So he says basically, and I wrote it down, and it's sort of the big idea of this talk, but the health and future of your relationship is determined by how you handle conflict. Now, it's determined by a lot of things. It isn't just this. but I just want you to understand how we do conflict really is critical to the health of your marriage, and I even think, as Gottman says, the future of your marriage is this area. And I joked about it earlier, but it's really true. Almost every couple, in fact, every couple knows how to have conflict. Every business, every church, am I right, pastors? There's conflict in church, a lot of it. There's conflict on church staffs. I mean, we all know how to have conflict. Very few people, honestly, very few people know how to get to resolution. In fact, if anything, this isn't just for your marriage. If you've got kids at home, this is something we need to teach our kids. We have 3 grown sons. We have 6 grandkids now. And man, I watched my wife teach these things we're going to teach you right now, teach them to our boys. She was a master at this, and nobody's teaching anybody this stuff. And yet we get married and we fight and we don't know what's going on. We don't know why, and we just end up isolated. We need to learn how to do conflict well, and God will help us walk through a process to get to resolution. So the first thing to talk about is what I call the 5 sort of styles of conflict or patterns of conflict. You'll fit in one of these or several of these. And the first one's what we call a winner. They like conflict. They usually are good at conflict. They tend to win conflict. And even as I say this, right now you're going, oh, that's him or that's her. And I know it's real easy also at a marriage conference or a retreat to listen to everything for your spouse. Don't do that. Listen for you. It's going to be so easy to just point everything at them. This is for you. You're not going to change them. You can only change you. And you can't change them because you've been trying, right? How's that working for you? Not very good. So work on you. So are you a winner? So the first one is a winner. And like I said, winners sort of like conflict. They sort of get fired up when conflict happens, and they're good at it. They bring eyewitness accounts and pictures and fingerprints. I'm kidding. But that's sort of a winner. The second one is what we call a yielder. They yield often in the conflict. And that doesn't mean they always do that, but often they will have this perspective. This relationship is more important than this conflict, so I'll yield. Okay, I agree, or we'll go your way. And again, some people say they're losers. I say they're yielders, okay? It isn't they lose the conflict. They yield for the sake of the relationship. The third one is what's called a withdrawer. Withdrawers don't like conflict. They withdraw. I mean, literally, they may get in their car and drive away for an hour or a month. They're just like, I don't like conflict. I don't want to be in this situation. And even if they can't remove themselves physically, if they're in a conflict and they're withdrawal, they're shut down emotionally. You ever had that? And again, you may be sitting there, right? Like, I'm married to that, or I am that. That's a withdrawal. And then the last one is really the best. It's a resolver. They're the person that's like, I don't want to leave this until we resolve it. Let's figure out whatever it takes to resolve this. That's the best. You want to get there. And if you're married to a resolver, it can drive you crazy in some ways because they keep wanting to talk about it and get through it. But at the end of the day, it's very good. Now, here's the thing. You don't know me. Probably never met me before. You don't know Ann, and so you don't know what our styles are. But I'll tell you a story that took place in the first couple months of our marriage, and you will see our styles. All right? So we get in this fight at her parents' house while they were all gone in Findlay, Ohio. Anybody know Findlay? It's where we grew up. So we're at our parents' house. It's spring. The windows are open. Everybody's gone. We're in the family room. We get in a fight. I don't know about what. And it starts to get heated. And I get up and I leave the room to go through the kitchen just somewhere because I'm a withdrawer. I didn't know any of this then. I didn't know there's patterns. I didn't know anything. But here I'm doing it, right? So I get up and I'm walking out of the room. And she literally yells at me. You'll get a sense for the spirit of Ann Wilson. As I'm walking away into the kitchen, I hear her from the couch in the family room go, "Where are you going? Get back here and fight me like a man, you chicken." That's what she yells. That's what she yells. In fact, that's the title of the chapter in our book, Get Back Here and Fight Me Like a Man. So, I'm walking through the kitchen and she yells that, and I turn around. Watch this. Again, 41 years ago, 42. I step into the family room, I go, "Oh yeah, well, bleep you," and I take off. And don't go telling people, "Wow, Wilson's a pastor who cusses." No, that was one time 41 years ago. That's not a pattern of my marriage. But I did. I just cursed at her, and it's sort of like, there you go, and I left. And as I'm leaving, I hear from the couch, "Oh yeah, well, beep, bleep you." And I'll never forget, I'd never heard my wife cuss in my life. I turn around, I look at her like, "You sinner. I can't believe it. And I left. I did. I left. I'm like, I'm out of here. And I go up the stairs. I literally go into her childhood bedroom, shut the door. She kicks open the door, sits down right beside me on the bed, and she says, we need to talk. What are you doing? Where are you going? Let's talk. Let's talk about this. And I remember sitting there thinking, what are you doing right now? Get out of here. Now, what do you think my wife is? She's a winner. She grew up in a home where her mom and dad, and Dick, her dad, really became my dad. He was my high school baseball coach, and, I didn't really have a dad, so he's a great man. They talked. They had dinner table talks. They got into it, and they figured it out. Sometimes it was loud, and they resolved stuff. My family, guess what I saw? Alcohol, abuse, divorce. And I never processed this in my brain, but my view of conflict is bad. You avoid it because it ends badly. Her view of conflict is good. You need to resolve it. You have a better relationship once you talk. So here she is sitting beside me like, where are you going? We got to talk. And I'm like, get out of here, right? Here's what I would tell you today about conflict. Conflict is neutral. Conflict's neutral. It's not bad. It's neutral. How you handle it determines bad or good in your life. So some people think it's really bad. Well, it's because you don't do it well. If you don't do conflict well, yeah, it ends poorly. Like John Gottman said, could end a divorce, could end a marriage, could end a relationship with a son or daughter, could end a relationship with a coworker, right? You don't do it well. But if you do it well, here's the thing. When you do it right, and again, you can't control the other person, so you never know how it's going to go. But when you do it well, your marriage is better than it would be without conflict. Every once in a while, I'll meet a couple and they say, we've never had a conflict in our whole life. And I go, you liar. Or one of you's not needed. I mean, it's just like, what is that, It's not something to be proud of. It's like, no, we do conflict, and we've learned how to forgive. We've learned how to reconcile. We've learned how to resolve. It's really important to do because I guess you had conflict maybe today, last night, this week. You're going to have it next week. The key is how do you do it? So that's why we want to talk about this. And so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you just 4 simple sort of steps to take in a conflict. And they're all going to start with the letter S because I'm a preacher from 30 years, and everything's got to start with an S or a T, an R, or a B, whatever. You do that sometimes? And these are actually going to be 2 words, statements that are action steps to do in a conflict. I'm just going to try and keep it simple. They're not really in a certain order, but they sort of are. And so the next time you have a conflict, whether it's tonight or this week, you can step back and go, okay, what is our pattern right now? What am I feeling? And then take these steps, because I'm all about taking the Word of God and making it real practical so you can live it out and see God transform your marriage. So to teach you these steps, I'm going to tell you one quick story. And in this story are all these steps. And most of them are the negative way not to do it, by the way I didn't respond well in this story, but you'll also see how to do it. So what the story is about, sorry about my throat, I keep having a tickle in there. I don't know, my middle son now is 33 years old, so 16 years ago, somewhere in there, he's 15, 16 years old. It was Sunday morning, I'm preaching at one of our campuses at our church, and we have 3 services at this particular campus. It's in between the second and third service, and we were renting a high school at that time. So I'm outside saying hi to people as they're walking into the lobby of this high school to come to our third service. And as I'm standing outside, it's a little cold because it's Michigan spring, so it's a little chill. It's sort of like today, although this is a beautiful day in Iowa, isn't it? It's a little colder than today. So I'm standing outside, and I see Ann whipping to our parking lot. I mean, it's a high school parking lot, like a race car driver, really fast. And there's a parking spot right there by the front door, and she's like squeals her tires in there, and parks right by the front door and jumps out of the car with Austin, our middle son, and Cody, our youngest, so like maybe 16 and 14. And she walks up to the front door, and she says to the boys, she told me later as she got the parking spot, she goes, "Thank you, Jesus, for the best parking spot by the front door." And then she says, as I'm walking up, she goes, look, Dad's out here. He's smiling. He's having a good day. And she walks up to me, she goes, "How you doing?" And I lean over to her, and I go, "Move the car." And she goes, "I'm not moving the car. Jesus gave me that spot." I go, "Jesus didn't give you that spot. Move the car." She goes, "I'm not moving the car." So I grab the keys, and I'm flipping them over to Austin, and she puts her arms out. And so if you were coming to church that day, you'd see your pastor and his wife sort of having this little thing. And at the same time, I'm going, move the car. And I'm like, hey, welcome to Kensington, doing the whole fake thing, right? And we're having this little thing. And finally, I'm like, I got to go in and preach. Move the car. And I go in. Now, you're like, what is this fight about? Right? You don't even know why I'm upset. She says later, when she came in the church and she sat in the back, she goes, I literally watched you preach, and I folded my arms. I go, I don't even like the pastor of this church. And so I get home, after church, because it was the last service, and I walk in the house, and we are instantly on. You ever been there? Yeah, some of you are shaking your head. Like the fight's still going? Like an hour later, we never got to resolve it, so I step into the kitchen, and I'm like, I cannot believe you parked there. I can't believe. Anyway, so we start going. I'm trying to do my Ann voice. But, so here's what the fight's about, okay? And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong, but I'm right, and she's wrong in this one. So here it is. And I'm not, and this is why, because you're like, why are you upset where she parked? Well, here's the thing. I'm one of the founders of our church, and when you start a church, you set the values, right? And every church has different values. I'm not saying this should be any other church's values, but one of our core values, which is still a core value 30 years in, was we decided on day one, the best parking spots on Sunday morning go to unchurched families, people. We have our staff never park by the front door. We park at the back of the parking lot. I used to carry my guitar and amp from across the street. It was just like those spots are saved for people that are looking for Jesus. So we don't park there. We used to have people join our church, raise their right hand, say, I will take the worst parking spot. It was just a thing. It's like and I don't know, if you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, you see that they make their employees do the same thing. They park in the back and they leave all those spots. So that was something we did 30 years ago. And so when I see my wife driving in, she's violating a core value. The pastor's wife right in front of everybody. Jesus gave me that spot. No, Satan gave you that spot. You just took a spot that somebody's now going to go to hell because they couldn't find a place to park. That's what's in my mind, right? So I'm like, I can't believe it, And so when I get home, I'm like, what are you thinking? She's like, well, everybody was already there. I'm like, no, they weren't. So anyway, we get in this fight. It gets so bad, we're yelling. And again, we don't yell much anymore. I know it sounds like we do. We just don't. But in that moment, I was pretty hot. She's on the other side of the kitchen yelling back. I'll never forget this. Cody, my 13, 14-year-old, my youngest son, who came on staff with me for the last 7 years of my church, but this is when he was 13. He's sitting at the kitchen table. He raises his hand during this fight. And I remember I was so into it, I'm like, what? Like what? And he goes like this, he goes, hey, don't you and mom travel around the country and teach couples how to resolve could you and I'll never forget, I'm like, yeah, you just sit there and watch, And so, so anyway, what happened is it gets so heated, she goes upstairs. She walks out. She withdraws, right? She knows better, but she's just like, I need a break. And she leaves and goes into the foyer. And I remember this is how bad it was. I yelled to her as she's going away, like, you're wrong. You should leave. That's where I was. And I remember Cody looks over me like, nice move, Dad. No words spoken, just looks. And so she leaves. She's gone about, 10 or 15 minutes. And again, I wish she was here because she would do what she did that day. She comes down. And she walks into the kitchen. I'm still sitting at the kitchen table. Cody's at the other end. She walks into the kitchen, and she does this. She goes, okay, let me tell you something. And she has her arms out like this. She goes like this. I do everything around here. She goes, well, you're over at the church preaching. Everybody's, okay, Wilson, you're the greatest. I am getting things done. I take care of the kids. I take care of the boys. I do the laundry. I cook all the meals. I mow the yard. I wakeboard just to be with the guys. I snowboard just to be with the guys. She just goes through this whole thing. I take care of everything. You're over there. Oh, Wilson, he's amazing. And I'm just doing this whole thing. So if one time there's a parking spot by the front door, God gets me, I should be able to take it. Sorry about that. She yells that. And while she's doing that, Cody looks at me, and no words are spoken. He just looks at me like, Dad, you are toast. Because it was so true, And so she says all that, and she was pretty loud, And she gets quiet, just stands there. And the kitchen's just like that. And I'll never forget. Now watch what's happening here. You're learning a lot of things not to do. Now here's something to do. I just look at her and I go, let me ask you a question. Again, she's 15 feet away. I go, do you feel like Kensington, that's the name of our church, do you feel like Kensington's more important to me than you are? And she just went. And right then, I knew what the fight was about. See, I thought it was about a parking spot. Every wife here knew, as soon as I started the story, it wasn't about a parking spot, right? All the wives knew. All the guys like, it wasn't? I didn't know. I actually thought it was about this parking spot. By the way, she never parked there again, but I thought it was about that. And when she shook her head, saying that she feels like my job as a pastor of a church is more important to me than she is, I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Now, I got to be honest. 10 years before that, I would have responded like this. I didn't in this moment because I had matured enough to know this is a bad move, and I used to do it in every fight. But here's what I would have done 10 years, and I hope you're not still doing this, but I'm going to share it because some of you are still responding this way. Here's what I would have said. That's ridiculous. You shouldn't feel that way. Kensington's not more important than you are. Are you kidding me? That's what I would have said. You know why? Because it isn't more important to me than her. And that's what I believe. And I would have told her, you shouldn't believe that either because that's not true. I hope you're not doing that. Because that's one of the things Gottman looks for when couples fight. It's called contempt. I know better than you know, and I'm going to tell you what you should think and feel. What I realized when she said that, if that's how she feels, it's true. Even though in my soul, no way is my church more important than my bride. But if she feels like it is, guess what? It is. And so when she did, and again, she didn't even answer verbally. I just said, you feel like it's more important? She just went like this. I then said, and this is a line to really learn, tell me more. Use that line with your kids, especially if you have teenagers. Use that with your spouse. In any moment when they share something, 3 simple words, tell me more. What do you mean by that? Why do you feel that? What am I doing that makes you feel like my job's more important than you? And you know what's really cool? At the beginning when Cody said, hey, and I was like making a joke, I'm like, I'm glad he got to see the whole thing. Because now he saw the whole fight and it got pretty heated, and then he saw, okay, now we're going toward resolution. And it didn't resolve right there because there was a lot behind her feeling that I had done over years that we needed to work through. But that was the first step to say, okay, we've got to get somewhere, because that, I'm going to talk about it in the second session, is her number one need. I have a need as well, but she has a number one need, and women know what it is. Men, we often miss this, but she longed to be loved and seen and appreciated, and I was not doing it, and I had no idea. I thought it was about a parking spot. Nope, it's a lot bigger than that. All right? So here's some practical things. First thing to do in a conflict. Ready? Just write this down. And I told you, they all start with the letter S. Shut up. And I could be nice and say, be quiet, just shut up. Just don't say anything. And I'm not saying you don't talk in a conflict, but you got to shut up and what? Listen. James 1, you guys know James? Very practical book. It's one of the greatest books in the New Testament, in my opinion. He says this, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this, everyone. Look at this. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. I mean, it's a very practical verse because James is saying, what do we often do when we're in a fight? We're quick to speak, we're quick to anger, we're slow to listen. He says, no, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth on purpose. Listen twice as much as you speak. What do we do in a conflict? We want to talk, we want to make our point. We often don't just shut up. I mean, literally, just don't do it. Say, tell me more. Why do you think that? Help me understand. And don't do it like I often did. Tell me more. What's up? My wife used to always say to me, you're so harsh, it just shuts me down. I'm like, I'm not harsh. She's just like, there you go. Exhibit A. I couldn't see it. It's just like, I can't see that. And so it's like one of the first things you can do in a conflict is just shut up. What's interesting about that story I just told you was when Ann went upstairs. Remember I yelled, yeah, you should go upstairs. Well, it got quiet for about 10 minutes. Cody's sitting there, I'm sitting there, and I'm like, okay, I'm missing something. So, by the way, this isn't one of the points, but very important thing to do in a conflict. You know what I did? I prayed. And no, I didn't pray to win. God, help me win this thing. Help her to see my side. That's how we do it. You know what I prayed? It's so interesting what happened next. I prayed literally this prayer: God, I'm missing something. Help me to see what I'm missing. And then I throw out this question, which I didn't even know I was going to ask, like, hey, I'm just sensing something. Do you feel like? And God's like, there it is. That's what you missed, dude. There it is. And now it's like, what are you going to do with that? You going to belittle that and make her feel bad, or are you going to go, okay, that's big, and this is my fault, and we got to do something about it? You know what's really interesting is Ann and I on Thursday last week shot a 7-day reignite your marriage 15 minutes per day video. We're calling it like a 7-day workout for your marriage. You've lost the passion, you've lost the spark. Take 15 minutes a day, watch this video. We're going to give you an action step. And in a week, you can start to reignite something. You know what we decided day one's about? By the way, go follow us on Instagram and order it. It's free. We're just going to give it to couples because we want to help you. But you know what's interesting is we sat down and said, how do you get the spark back? Here's something we never thought we'd start with. When one of you, the husband or wife, doesn't matter, owns up to their sin and says, I'm sorry and I was wrong, something happens to the spark. Who's going to tell you that? They're going to say, go on a date, have sex, whatever's going to get your spark back. It's like, well, if you're in isolation, you don't get the spark back until one of you goes, I'm sorry. I was really wrong. And I didn't know it in that moment, but in that kitchen when I said, tell me more. I have really hurt you, haven't I? A spark. I mean, it was very tiny, but a little tiny spark started to come back to our marriage in her because I had blown that spark out. So when you shut up and listen, as simple as that is, and it sounds like that's a conflict resolution practical step, yeah, it might be one of the most important ones. Just shut up and say, honey, tell me more. Tell me what you feel. What did I do? How did I do that? Rather than, you're wrong to think that. Why do you think that? I didn't do anything, because I would pull out my calendar and show her that I was home when she said I was too busy. It's just crazy. So the first one is just simple. Shut up. Second one, and I actually was able to do this in the conflict as well, is what we call soft answer. So shut up and then respond softly. Respond gently. I don't know if you noticed, but even when I told the story, I wanted you to feel what it was like in that kitchen. When I said to her, hey, let me ask you a question, it wasn't loud. Hey, let me ask you a question. Judgmental, contempt, one of Gottman's things. It was soft and gentle. I was literally almost whispering, hey, let me ask you a question. Do you feel like it changes the atmosphere of a fight when one of you is soft and gentle? It's interesting. Some of you know this. The book of Proverbs is such a book of wisdom. You know this, right? You could live your life just by going through the Proverbs. And I've done this many times. There's 31 days a month. Take a proverb a day. I'm sure many of you have done that. But in Proverbs 15, it says this: a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. That one principle right there in the middle of a conflict changes everything. If one of you will respond gently or softly, it turns away wrath. But if you respond harshly, it escalates. So every conflict goes like this. One of you is escalating, right? What happens? The other one usually escalates, and here we go. Road rage, you name it. Turn on YouTube any day of the week now. You can see it in the comment sections. It's just like, look what happens. But if one of you is escalating and the other de-escalates, soft answer, turns away wrath, I'm going to respond gently. What happens to this person? If they keep escalating, don't say this, but you should be thinking, you're an idiot. What are you doing? I'm de-escalating, and this person goes like this. That tells you there's something broken in them, because when one person escalates and the other de-escalates, here's what Proverbs says: a soft answer turns away that. This will bring this person, hopefully, down a bit. I'll never forget, I was pulling out of my subdivision one weekday morning, and it's just a 2-lane road, and all these cars were coming, and I couldn't get out. You ever get frustrated? Like, come on, I can't get out. And, I couldn't get a spot. And so finally, there's just this little gap, and I pull out. And as I pulled out, I realized I cut this guy off. He was coming a lot faster than I thought. And so I thought, okay, what's going to happen? He's going to be nice Michigan guy, or is it going to be road rage? And so I pulled out, and I realized, he's right on my bumper. And I look in the rearview mirror, and what's he doing? He's yelling. All the windows are up, but he is so mad. And he's like bumping up to my car the whole next 2 miles. Anybody done that? You're not that guy, are you? That was that guy. And I'm sort of looking in the mirror trying to say, I'm sorry, but, he just doesn't care. And I'm thinking, man, the guy wants to fight me just because I pulled out in front of him. Well, we get to a light about 3 miles down where there's another lane. And I'm like, oh, no. If he pulls beside me, and sure enough, there are 2 cars there. So when he pulls over here, and he's right here. And I don't want to look at him because I know I can feel it in my periphery. He's yelling, he's gesturing certain fingers, and I can hear his voice. My window's still up. And so I'm just sort of looking like this. I never even looked over, and he's trying to get me to look. Beeping. I mean, he's just outraged for a little pulled in front of him. But anyway, I'm just trying to be calm. And so here's what I do. I'll never forget it. I just turn to him like this, and I go, hey, sorry, my bad. I just mouthed it through a window. I am not kidding. This guy's like, he goes, oh, hey, no problem. See you later. And he drove off. I mean, I literally watched that change like that. And I'm like, what just happened? Soft answer turns away wrath is what happened. I saw it, some stranger. Now, I'm not saying that happens every day in your marriage or in your family room, but I'm telling you, when you shut up and listen, and why you're listening, because there's a story behind their story. Counselors call it a presenting problem. Person comes in to get counseling, a counselor knows they're going to present a problem, but it's just the presenting problem. There's really something underneath that. I thought the problem with Ann was a parking spot. It was her feeling loved, right? So when you shut up and listen, I mean really listen. By the way, that means put the phone away. You can actually live at least an hour without your phone. Do you know that? New studies have shown you don't need to be looking at it. It's crazy. You put it away, you turn off the TV, you have eye contact, so you shut up and listen. And then when you respond gently, everything, absolutely everything changes. Let me read you one thing that's really interesting. No, I'll skip it. I'm going to do that in the next session. Okay, here's the third one. Solve this conflict or go to bed. I call it solve or sleep. And I put a question mark there because you don't know. You get in a conflict, and some of them you can feel as you're in it. Oh, we're gonna get to the end of this today, or this hour, or by dinner time, right? You can just sense we're moving somewhere. But you know this as well, right? You get in a conflict like, oh no, this is not gonna be solved in the next hour, maybe even today. And here's what we think, especially as Christians in the church. We think, I can't go to bed tonight. I can't go to sleep tonight because I'm violating scriptural principles if I sleep on this fight. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Anybody know the Bible well enough to know what I'm talking about? Ephesians 4, pop it up. Ephesians 4:26 says, do not let the sun go down on your anger, right? Do not give the devil a foothold. It's literally right there. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you're still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. Now, it's a passage in the New Testament, which is awesome in Ephesians, which is very practical about life and especially about conflict and marital conflict. And so when we got married, the premarital counselor that we sort of worked with, a mentor, told us that verse is literal. You can never go to sleep with a fight or anger in your marriage. Stay up as long as it takes to resolve it. So we tried. And you heard about our first year. It was really good, right? Every night, and it'd be like 2 a.m, and she'd be literally shaking me as I'm laying there, like trying to stay awake. She goes, you don't even care. You're falling asleep. I'm like, I really do care. I just can't stay awake anymore. You don't care. And I'm like, can we finish this tomorrow? No, that's sin. We got to finish it right now. So we're trying to do the Bible thing, right? And I'll never forget. I don't know what month it was, but I remember laying there. Again, it's 3 a.m. We're not getting anywhere. And I'm falling asleep. And I remember this hit me. It was like a revelation. I'm like, wait. And I said this to her. I go, the sun went down hours ago. We got till tomorrow night, right? That sun's gone. We got till 5, 6 tomorrow night. And then I actually went and studied that in the original and, in seminary, got a master's degree. Anyway, and I realized it's not a literal principle. It's a practical principle. It doesn't mean you have to have it done by tonight's sundown. It does mean this: resolve it quickly. It may take a day, it may take a week, it may take 2 or 3 days. Don't let it drag on for months. Like, hey, can we talk about this again when football's over? The season? No. Tomorrow. In fact, I don't know if you ever saw a book by Shanti Feldhahn, a good friend of ours. She's a researcher who's written all these great books. She wrote one about the happiest marriages. All she did was research the happiest marriages, and she wanted to talk to those couples and say, what things do you do that make your marriage as happy as it is? One of the things she discovered was the best marriages often sleep on a conflict and resolve it the next day. Because they just take that principle and they say, it's not literal, it doesn't have to be done today. If it can be, great. If it can't, go to bed. And one of the things she discovered, and it was so true in our marriage, is sometimes men need some time to process. They don't know what they're thinking or feeling. Ann would say to me so many times, and she could not understand it. I didn't know either. Like, what are you thinking? What are you feeling right now? I'm like, I don't know. She's like, of course you know. What is it? I'm like, I really don't know. No, you don't know. No, I don't know. Well, I know. Well, great that you know. I don't know. And then the next day I'd wake up. You ever done this? And it could be the other way. It could be the wife that's this way. I'd wake up and go, I've thought about it. I know what I'm feeling. I know what I'm thinking. Can we talk? I never knew that was allowed. Now I'm like, that's sometimes preferable. You can just put it to bed and schedule it for the next day, and then you can get somewhere. And here's what's often true. Shanti wrote this in her book. Often the wife wants to fix it quickly because she thinks the relationship is at stake. And if you let it go overnight, what are you doing? You don't care about the relationship. Often men say, I need some time because they don't know what they're feeling, or their anger is so high, they're not going to say something helpful in their anger. John Gottman did a study where he put these couples that he watched fight together, they wired them up and put their heart rate on monitors. And here's one of his quotes in his book. He says, when a man's heart rate goes over 98 in a fight, the next thing out of his mouth is really stupid. That's what he said. And here's another thing that he did. They would have these couples fighting, and they watched their heart rates. The couples didn't know this, but they're watching. And then they made up this scenario. They'd come in the room and say, hey, time out. We had some technical problems. We have to have you stop for a minute. We'll re-engage in a couple minutes. And they walked out. It was all made up. They just said that, and then they came back in, and they watched their heart rates go. And when they went back into the fight, it was much more productive because they just settled down. And sometimes the man needs a night to sleep on it, or the wife needs to sleep on it, and you start again. And sometimes, you know this, it gets escalated again, and sometimes you have to go time out. This didn't go anywhere well. So sometimes you can solve it in the moment. Sometimes you need to sleep on it. How are we doing time-wise? We're good. Here, I'll show you a story that Ann would tell right now. It's a story about our oldest son, CJ. When he was 13, she and CJ got in a fight before school, and she's driving him to school. And as they're driving to school, she says to him, CJ, we've got to resolve this, so let's talk. And he just sits there, and he won't talk. And this drives my wife crazy. I know this for 41 years. We got to communicate. We got to talk. He won't talk. And so she gets to the line in school, the line where you're going to drop him off, and she says to him, do not get out of the car right now. We have to talk before you get out of the car. Just don't do that. And he looks at her and goes, and gets out and shuts the door and goes into school. And I remember when she told that story, I'm like, I wonder where he learned that move. So he goes into school, and she's like, oh my goodness, we have a conflict and we haven't resolved it. So she's driving home, and by the way, she would say right now, one of the best things you can do in a conflict, or in life in general, is stop and pause and say, God, what do I need to do right now? And she says, I'm driving home, and she says, God, help me understand what I need to do to help resolve this and teach my son how to resolve conflict. And she gets this visual image in her head. So she goes home. Do you have that picture? It's a little stick figure. She draws this stick figure, and this is actually a picture of her drawing that she drew at home. All right, and she laid it on CJ's desk up in his bedroom, so when he came home, he would see it. And so he comes home later from the day, and he literally grabs this piece of paper, and he takes it down to the kitchen. He goes, Mom, what is this? Is this your attempt at art? And she goes, yeah, actually, that's you. He was a little taller than her at 13, and that's me. She doesn't wear a dress every day, but, she had to do the female thing. So, and she goes, that's us, and that little box in the middle is a brick. Because we had a fight this morning, and there's a brick right now in our relationship, and if we don't resolve this, probably we're going to have another brick, and the next thing you know, and she says, I've seen couples do this over years, they build walls because they never resolved the brick. And CJ literally says to her, he goes, Mom, I'm not mad anymore. I don't even care. And that's literally how he talked at 13, and she goes, I know, I'm not mad either, but that doesn't mean this thing's resolved. We need to talk it through. It's like, well, how do we do that? And you know what she did? She walked him through what I'm telling you right now. Things like listening, gentle answer, tell me what you're feeling, why you're feeling that, tell me what I did to upset you, let me tell you what I felt. they communicated, they got to a resolution, and then took her eraser and erased the brick. And she goes, now we're good. There'll be more bricks to come, but if we don't deal with them, we're going to have a wall. And you know what happens in relationships that have walls? You can't tear them down. You try to forgive, and it's just a wall, and it ends up in a really, really bad place. And I've been there, and we've all been there. And so, man, teaching your kids this, but teaching you and I this, it's solve it if you can, or go ahead and sleep on it and resolve it the next day. But do not let bricks build up. And then the last one, and trust me, there's no way in 5 or 6 minutes I could do justice this last point. I've done 6 and 8 week series at my church on this one thing. And when you hear the word, you're going to go, yep, this is a biggie. Forgive. Seek forgiveness or grant forgiveness. And again, I've got a couple pastors in here, and they're like, yeah, this is a Bible study. This is a month or 2 month long weekend series. You cannot talk about forgiveness in 5 minutes. But I'll just say this. At some point, you've got to decide, and it's a choice, not a feeling. It's a choice. Will I forgive him? Will I forgive her? Because you know this. We hurt one another in marriage, sometimes very, very deeply. Maybe there's been a betrayal of your vows in your marriage, an affair, or lies or secrets or something like that has happened. So if you're the person that has hurt your spouse by doing something or saying something or acting in a way that hurt them, you seek forgiveness. And again, there's so much to say, but when you seek forgiveness, you don't go, hey, I repented, we're good, right? You need to forgive me. The Bible says you're supposed to forgive me. It's 5 p.m., do it by 6, right? That's sort of what we do. It's like, I'm good now, you're good. And sometimes, man, your wound in their life is deep. It may take time, months, years. And you know what you do? Like, let's say you're the one that had the affair. You know what you do? You broke trust in a matter of minutes. You rebuild trust in a matter of years. It's like a Lego thing, right? You can come in and kick it, and it's shattered. You want to rebuild a room full of Legos? It's going to take you a long time. And it's peace. Same thing in a marriage. It's rebuilt. I was sitting with a guy last week who just confessed to his wife an affair, a sexting affair. And one of the things I said, dude, I don't have it here. I said, this is now her domain. There's no text, there's no emails she doesn't look at. You got to be real. And he's like, that's ridiculous. I'm like, yeah, it is, isn't it? That's what you earned. Prove you can be trusted again. And she gets access to your calendar, everything. It's just the way you're going to do it. So you seek forgiveness whatever way is needed to do that. But if you're the one that's been hurt, some of you know this, but Ephesians 4:32 is probably the best passage to say, forgive others as you have been forgiven. If there's any mark that we in the church, we as followers of Christ should be known for, it's this one. We forgive. And I'm not saying that you let people walk all over you, and if you're in a marriage where you're being abused by your spouse, I'm not saying, oh, just let him keep hitting you or let her keep verbally. No, I'm saying get safe first. I would say remove yourself for a time. I'm saying get divorced. Get safe, but even then you're going to have to get to the place where God allows you to forgive. But you can't do it. I can't do it. God can do it. And he does it. One of my favorite definitions of forgiveness is giving up our right to punish. It's a simple definition, but we give up our right. Do we have the right? Yes, we do. They hurt us. They violated a vow. They walked out. Whatever they did, we have the right. Giving up that right as Jesus did with us, we extend what we've received vertically from Christ to our spouse, to our son, to our daughter, to our neighbor, to our boss, whoever it is. And again, I'm not saying you get walked all over. At some point, though, you have to make the choice. I'll end with this. Excuse me. I was done preaching one Sunday, decades ago, sitting on the couch. My oldest is 35, so he was 7 years old. So that gives you an idea how long ago it was. CJ and Austin were playing on our family room carpet, and Ann and I were sitting on the couch. And I say to Ann, now listen to what I say. I don't even realize what she heard, but here's what I say. I said, can you believe my dad left me when I was that age? That's all I said. Just a flippant little comment on a Sunday afternoon while the Lions were getting beat. So I'm sitting there, and I say that, and here's what Ann says. She's so wise. She goes, you know you have issues with your dad, right? That's what she says. I go, I don't have issues with my dad. What are you talking about? She goes, do you know what you're like when he calls you? I'm like, what do you mean? What am I like? She goes, you literally don't talk to him. I'm like, yeah, okay, bye. It's like no conversation. There's no relationship there. And then she says this. Don't you love it, guys, when your wife lays a bomb on you? Your spouse says something that's just like, eh. She goes, you're going to have to forgive your dad someday. That's all she said. You know what I did in my wonderful maturity? I said, I forgave my dad years ago. What are you talking about? She goes, I'm just saying you're going to have to forgive your dad someday. And then, later I'm up in my office and I'm like, God, were you speaking to me through Ann? Yes, I was. It was one of those loud things like, you haven't forgiven him. You have bitterness. You're punishing him. You've been punishing him your whole life, that kind of thing. And so I'll never forget. I'm like, okay, that was Sunday. I literally said to myself, I'll do it by next Sunday. That's my goal. I'm a preacher, Sunday to Sunday. Next Sunday, I'll forgive him. You will not believe this. The next day, I don't know why I'm in a grocery store, but I'm in a grocery store. And a buddy of mine who I play a lot of golf with, Jay, walks in. He goes, dude, can't believe I ran into you at a grocery store. I've got a book you got to read. I go, really? Yeah, I'm going to go get it. It's in my car. I'm like, okay. He runs out to the car. He comes in. And he hands me this little paperback. Here's the title, Forgive and Forget, Healing the Hurts We Don't Deserve by Lewis Smedes. I'm like, I look at him like, why are you giving me that book? He goes, I don't know. I was reading it. I just kept thinking about you. You mentioned your dad a couple times. I think maybe you need to read this. I'm like, think about how that worked. The day before, he doesn't know I said to Ann, okay, I'm going to forgive my dad by next week. So I start reading this book, and long story short, I realize on page 1, it's going to take a while. It's not going to be done in a week. In fact, he walks you through this 4-step process, and one of the things he says in there, I'll never forget, Smead says this, when you forgive someone, you set a prisoner free, only to discover you're the prisoner. I literally dropped the book when I read that, like, oh my goodness. I had locked my dad up for years. You can't have a relationship with me. When I started doing well in college football, guess who shows up at the games? A guy who's not a part of my life for the last 10 years is now in the stadium wanting to be a part of my life as he's reading about me in Florida as he was an airline pilot. I'm like, you don't get back in my life. You don't walk out when I'm 7 and show up when I'm 19. I was like, and so I locked him up. And when I read that quote, I'm like, I've locked me up. I realized in that moment, I'm not going to become the man God has called and created me to be until I am free of this one issue with my dad. And so I said right there, okay, I'm going to go start this process. Let's do it. And again, I thought it'd be a month. 5 years for me. I'm not putting a timetable on you, but the wound was pretty deep. And 5 years later, I'd gotten to the place where I'm literally sitting with him outside Tampa Bay Stadium. The Lions are about to play the Bucs. I was down there with the team for a game. In fact, you know what I'm doing tomorrow night? I'm speaking to the Tampa Bay Bucs for their chapel before their Monday night game. So I'm going to get to go to a Monday night game in Tampa Monday night and watch a team win. Well, they've just lost 2. But anyway, so I'm sitting outside the stadium with my dad because he lived in Florida. He came over and listened to me speak at chapel, and then we're sitting in his car. And I'll never forget. And I'm sharing this because sometimes it doesn't always go the way you're going to think. I say to my dad in the car, hey, Dad, I need to say something to you. I forgive you. Here's what he says. I'll never forget. He looks at me and goes, what the blank for? I did not see that coming. I had this reunion in my mind. They could say, I'm so sorry, son. I know I hurt you. He said, what the blank for? And I looked at him like, he really doesn't know. Here's the thing you learn about forgiveness. It has nothing to do with the other person. They may respond wonderfully. They may say, what the blank for? They may own it. They may never own it. They may be in a grave. Forgiveness is about you. And so in your marriage right now, if you need to forgive, again, it isn't like I wait till they start acting the way. It's like I have to choose. And maybe it's not even in your marriage. Maybe it's like this, and I never knew this. My unforgiveness with my dad from decades ago was affecting my relationship with my wife and even my boys in present time. I'm just telling you, it's that big. And I got to tell you this. When you forgive someone who doesn't deserve it, God does set you free. I used to say to the guys at Kensington Church, I said, I became a man at age 35. Like, what? You became? I wasn't a man until I was free to be a man. And it had a lot to do with forgiving my dad. And I got to tell you, the last part of the story is he died a few years later. And so we have a service in Florida that I'm the minister of, right? This little chapel. My mom doesn't come. She never forgave him. My two brothers and sisters sitting there, they are still mad. And I felt like, wow, I think I'm the only free person in this chapel. And I could literally look at a casket and say, I love this man. And it wasn't funeral speech, it was real. God had done something. I'm not saying our relationship became this perfect little thing, but God had did something so rich that I could never, ever do. And so the last thing I'll say is this. You cannot do any of these things we just talked about. Shut up, soft answers, solve or sleep, seek or grant forgiveness without the last S. I told you there's 4, there's actually one more, and we're done. It's called surrender. If you don't surrender to Jesus, all I can say to you is good luck. Good luck. It's not going to work. You'll have a better marriage for about 3 days. You'll be like, yeah, that was great. And then 4 days later, you're like, what happened to you? You were changed, but not. You don't have the power in ourselves. We are broken sinners that try to do good things, and we can sort of do it for a little bit, but we are messed up. And without the literal power of God that comes into our life when we surrender him, put him in first place, then everything changes. I'll end with this, and this is Ann. This is an illustration she did years ago with me as we were doing a message at our church, and she just had this visual. She's a visual teacher. You'll see another one in the next session, and she wanted to do this thing, and you can tell in this thing, I don't even know what she's going to do, and it became sort of this epic moment that is, I think, a great visual, a picture of what surrender looks like. So roll the tape.
I want to do this last illustration. You know, you guys can probably tell I'm a visual learner. That's why I did that thing with the brick. Last week we had the marble. Well, this week I'm going to have another visual because for me, I feel like in our lives, we're all on this journey of life. And we think we know what will bring us happiness. No matter how old we are, we think if I do these certain things, if I go to the right school and I have the same right friends and I'm marry the right person. Oh my gosh. So this is my visual this week. This tandem is going to be like our journey of life, right? So here we go. For me.
I gotta fix the handlebars. This has literally been hanging up in our garage for 15 years.
I bought this with I saved pennies and bought it when I was 12 years old. So we're on this journey of life.
I still don't know why we have this bike at all in our house.
It's awesome, look at it.
She wants to go get it all fixed up. I'm like, no, please don't.
Okay, so if I'm in life, right, I think I know what's gonna bring me happiness. So, because as long as I'm in control, I'm in the front seat, I know where to go, I know what to do, and I know the things that will make me happy, bring me joy, bring me fulfillment. So I'm on this journey like, okay, this is good. I'm gonna date this guy, I'm gonna go to this college, and I'm going there and I'm realizing after a while, have you ever done this? You're after all your dreams, but when you get some of your dreams, it's exactly what we talked about. I'm thinking, that didn't do it. Oh, it just didn't bring me the joy and the fulfillment that I thought it would. And so I'm getting a little frustrated on my journey, but I think, okay, I'll try another route. I'll try to go to another path that will bring me joy. And about that time, my sister came home she was living out of state. She was 7 years older, and she came home and she said, Ann, I'm telling you, I have found the most amazing secret to life, basically. And she said, I have this relationship with Jesus Christ. I've understood now why he came, why he died, that he wants a relationship with us. It's not that we get to heaven on doing the right things. It's being with him in relationship of surrendering your life to him. And as she started talking about that, I knew God in terms of, you know what it was? He was Elohim to me. I believed, if you would have asked me, am I a Christian? Yeah, I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus. But I didn't know him. I didn't have a relationship. So when she said that, I said, yes, I want to surrender my life to Jesus. So Jesus, come on. I want you on this. You're Jesus. Come on, Jesus.
You want me in?
Yes. Get on the back.
So you picked the right guy to play Jesus.
Yeah. So I'm on this journey, right? Like, okay, you ready? We're going. Like, you're going to get me to heaven, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. So we're going. I think this is awesome. Jesus is with me, doing the things. But then I start going the same places that I always went. You know, I'm still trying to be in control. I'm the one. And Jesus like, no, I got this. Like, I know where to go. So I go to the same paths, and I'm so frustrated. And now it's worse because Jesus is on the back and he sees where I'm going. So now I feel guilty. So as I'm going, I think, oh, this is terrible. And I feel this nudging of Jesus. And I feel like he's wanting to be here, in control, taking me on this journey. And the more I discover who he is in the Word, the more I'm realizing he loves me. He's designed me with a purpose and a plan. And what would it look like if I allowed him to be in total and complete control and to lead me on this journey? And so I was so scared. I was so scared because I thought, what path is he going to take? He might take me to Detroit. He might make me marry a pastor. Who knows what he would do?
He would never do that, honey.
But I made this prayer. I'm like, all right, Lord, I give you everything. I'm going to put you in total and complete control. I'm going to trust you. It was so scary, but I thought, all right. But it felt good, like, okay, here we go. And like, yeah, I'm free. I can let him go wherever we want. We're going. But then after a while, it's all good for a while, right? But then it's like, wait, why are we going down this road? Like, I do not like that road. I don't want to go down there. It's scary. It's risky.
Trust me.
It's awkward. So then I'm starting to look over. I'm being the backseat driver. Like, no. I never said that I would go there. No, I'm going to help you. Let me help you, Jesus. I'm trying to get this thing. Like, Lord, no. Like, don't do that. Like, no, here, I'm going to help you. Have you ever done this? I am good at helping Jesus. Like, Jesus, no. And I get so scared and I want to control it. And he's saying, Ann, trust me. Just go where let me take you where I know you will find joy and fulfillment. This is good, right?
Yeah. I didn't know you were going to.
And here's what happens.
Fall on my head.
And I think what happens is when we're back here, it feels scary, and sometimes we don't want to do it. And I think sometimes God is saying, just cling to me. And there's sometimes it's so hard that I can't even pedal. And it's almost like I just want to cling to him, close my eyes, and trust him for everything. Because this is the scariest position at all. And yet, it's the safest, most wonderful place we could ever be. I want to do this last illustration. You guys can probably...
So that's what you're missing without her being here. But you'll get a taste of her the whole day. And all I would really want to leave you with as we take a short break is that image. Every time I've watched that of her clinging, that's the image of us with Jesus. And he longs to be in control. And again, it is. Ann's right. It's scary. You don't know what that could mean, but it's the safest place. And it's really the only way your marriage is going to be the marriage you hope for. Those dreams you had are his dreams. And that can be reignited again as you surrender to him. And I'll end with this. You can't make your spouse do this. You do. You know how many times in 30 years at church, especially wives would come up and say, how do I get my husband to do blank blank or to walk with Jesus, whatever? And every time they're so disappointed in my answer, I'm like, you don't. You can't. All you can do is pray and take care of you. You surrender and pray. Or a guy would come up and say, how do I get my wife? I'm like, you can't. You can't control somebody else. I'm guessing you already tried. That's why you're asking me. So guess what? Take care of you. Surrender you. Pray for him. Pray for her. And I'm telling you, it's hard when you're married to somebody that's really walking with Jesus. It's hard to turn away from that. It's a magnet. It pulls you toward rather than repels you. That's what grace, that's what forgiveness, that's what the aroma of Christ does in a home, in a church, in a team, you name it. When people are literally living it out, we're surrendering to him, it changes everything. So we're going to take a break. I know we got till 11:30, right? Jason's like, you got another hour. It's like, guess what? We need a break. You can go to the bathroom, whatever. What time is it? Let's start again at, 11:50? 10:50? About 10 minutes from now? All right, see you back here in 10 minutes. Ready to roll? You know what? Is it bad if I go down there? Can you see me down there? I like being close to people. I feel like I'm a ways. Am I okay down here? Audio-wise, won't feedback or anything? Maybe I'll do that. Whatever. Okay, any questions at this point? Anybody want to ask anything? If you want to be anonymous, say, I have a friend who wonders, you do that one. I have a neighbor. Anybody got anything at all? About anything? Yeah. I guess it started in that pre-married conference. Yeah, we're not very good at art, you can tell. That's the best we can do.
When's the last time you and your wife had an argument?
This week. Yeah. I mean, arguments don't stop, It really, I joked about it earlier. They are much different now than they were, and part of it is putting those principles into practice. We rarely, hardly ever yell anymore. I mean, they were pretty heated back in the day, and I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I think we've matured a little bit. But you're never going to get to a point where you don't have conflict. I think it's healthy. I think it's healthy because if you're not having some disagreements, you're hiding things and you're not willing to do the work to be as intimate as possible. At the Weekend to Remember conference that I went to as an engaged young man, Ann and I now speak at it for the last 30 years. One of our principles of the weekend is every marriage is drifting toward isolation or moving toward oneness. You don't drift toward oneness. You have to move. You have to do things to build oneness in your marriage. But isolation, you drift. And if you don't do something, you're just going to go there. And conflict's one of the big reasons. So, good question. Anything else? Okay, so let's talk about this. Wow. I don't know if I can do it in 36 minutes. We're supposed to be done at 11:30. And I've been calling Nathan Jason. I don't know why. He looked like a Jason to me. I'm so sorry. I met him last night, and Nathan, good man. And by the way, you probably know this about this guy, but as I was asking him last night from the drive from the airport, I'm like, hey, what are you doing around here? This guy's having a ministry that's unbelievable. Did you guys know that? With men, with pastors. I was so blown away. I told Ann. That's all I told her last night. Carrie's like, really? Yeah, sure. All right, so let's talk about this. And I can do this in a shortened version because I want to make sure you're out here on time to go eat. And then we're back at what? 1? 11:30 to 1 break. And we'll do 2 more sessions after lunch. And by the way, you don't want to miss after lunch because we might talk about a little thing called sex. Okay, I don't know what you thought of that, but we're going to talk about God's perspective on that aspect of your marriage, and then the last one will be, what do you do with this as you walk out of here? But this one is about the number one need of a woman in your marriage and the number one need of a man in your marriage. And I don't know which way you want to start, but I think we can do the men first because it's real easy and quick, and then we can spend some more time talking about the women. I don't know why you're laughing right now. But I think I do know why you're laughing. But let me ask the ladies this. If I would ask just the women to answer, what do you think the number one need of your man is? Just yell it out. Respect? Appreciation? Anything else come to your mind? I often hear sex is one of them. And I'll just say it from the front. Sex and respect, same thing. So, in case you're wondering, sort of, not really. But it's really interesting when you ask church people that question, often you'll hear a man or woman say respect. You know why? It's biblical. We've done a lot of marriage stuff in corporations, non-Christian corporations where they ask us to come in and do stuff. And we'll talk about this. It's really interesting. People that don't go to church or don't know the Bible, they don't often answer, they don't know. They'll say sex, not kidding. My man's number one need is sex, or respect isn't at the top because they've never really been taught. But it's really interesting, and I don't have time to develop this whole thing, but that answer of respect is in a passage in the New Testament. Anybody know where? It's the longest discussion of marriage in the Bible is in the New Testament. Ephesians chapter 5. In fact, if you ever want to study marriage in the Bible, here's what I'll tell you. You can study it, just don't do it. Because the marriages in the Bible are pretty pathetic. Seriously, they're not, like people say, I want a biblical marriage. I'm like, no, you don't. You have multiple wives, and you have dysfunction and murder and rape. It's just, wow. It's like, one of the reasons I became a follower of Christ, long story short, is I always thought the Bible was full of perfect people that never sinned. And then when I started to actually read it, I'm like, wow, this is one of the most honest books you'll ever read. They don't hide anything. It's like, is anybody good in this book? Yeah, there's one. His name's Jesus. And he restores all the others. And then you get into the New Testament, and there's a lot of teaching that applies to marriage, but there's really one passage that's really about marriage, and it's in the book of Ephesians. And one of the reasons I love Ephesians is it's 6 chapters. The first 3 are theology and doctrine. The last 3 are how do you live that theology and doctrine out. And again, there's so much to be said here, but again, if you do an overview, it's like the first 3 are like, who is God? It's like theology proper. Who am I? It's like identity. And I always used to say at my church, every decision you and I make in our life is based on 2 beliefs. What we believe about God, what we believe about ourselves. I call it theology and identity. What we believe about God determines every decision you make. Is he a good God? Is he with me? Can I trust him? What you believe about yourself, am I powerful? Am I in Christ? Does that make me uniquely, created by God? Or am I just sort of a loser that's, man, what you believe about yourself, identity, what you believe about God determines every decision you make. You can trace almost every decision, good and bad, back to that. And so Paul, writing Ephesians, lays out first 3 chapters. Here's who God is. It's unbelievable to study. Then here's who you are in Christ. And then chapter 4, he says, okay, based on that, let's talk about what it looks like in your home and your work. And chapter 5, he applies it to marriage. Chapter 6, to parenting. We wrote a parenting book that's out there called No Perfect Parents. And we take chapter 6 and say, so what would that look like in your home? By the way, we called it No Perfect Parents because you're looking at one. we don't write perfect books. We're like, here's how you struggle. I want to turn the mic off every time I cough. I'm sorry. But so here's what's interesting. You get to chapter 5, and he starts talking about husbands and wives. And it's really interesting. Most men, and I'm sort of joking, but not really, know one verse in the Bible, and it's in Ephesians 5. And it's verse 22. And it's the only verse they know in the whole Bible. Anybody know what it says? Wives, submit to your husbands. They're like, yep, I know the Bible. That's what it says. They have no idea what it means. No idea. And they've never read the other parts. And by the way, when you look at it, chapter 5, and you just compare how many verses are written to the husband and how many to the wife, guess what, guys? I don't know the exact number, but it's like 78 and 80% to the men, a couple to the wife. It's really, guys, here's what it would look like in your home. But here's all I want to say about that. To understand Ephesians 5 on marriage, you have to understand the context. I'm a big context guy. You don't just pull a verse out. What's Paul writing about? And it goes all the way back to verse 1 in Ephesians 5, where I'll read it to you. He says, therefore be imitators of God as beloved children. By the way, guess what he did just right there? He went back to theology. Be imitators of who? God. Who's God? If I don't know who God is, how do I imitate him? As beloved children. Identity. He referred back to it again. He says, okay, if you understand who God is, this is his character, imitate, the actual Greek word is mimic that, copy that. So think about this for a second. Again, I'm taking too much time, but I want to build the foundation. Our neighbors who don't go to church anywhere should be able to look at us who go to church and follow Christ and know what God's like. Because we imitate or mimic God. Not perfectly, but they should get a glimpse of what God looks like by our marriage. Isn't that scary? Like, my neighbors are going to watch our marriage to get a picture of God? Yep, that's the way it's supposed to be. In fact, that's a bigger vision for your marriage. It isn't about you being happy, really. It's about you revealing him to the world through this thing called marriage. And so he says, imitate God. But here's the thing. If you're really like saying, okay, I want to do that, you would have to say, I can't. I've tried to be like God. I can't do it. I mean, I can't even do it for 5 minutes. What I think or what I say, it's like, wow, I fail miserably. And Paul's like, okay, let me show you how you do it. 17 verses later, a verse very misunderstood in Scripture, in verse 18, he says, and do not get drunk with wine, for that's debauchery or a waste of time, but be filled with the Holy Spirit. Ever heard that one? Yeah. He's like 17 verses later, like, you want to imitate God? You can't do it. Here's how you do it. Don't get drunk with wine. And by the way, don't get caught up in the alcohol illustration. I have people come up to me after I preach on this and go, hey, so he didn't say anything about beer, so beer's okay? I'm like, You're missing the point. The point isn't whether you drink alcohol or have one beer or not, or a glass of wine. The point is what? If you're drunk, you are controlled by, you don't know this by experience, but you know people that have been controlled by alcohol. You know, the alcohol content in the wine or beer, whatever it is what's controlling you. It's a beautiful illustration. Paul says, that's a waste of time, that's stupid. But, here's what he's saying, get drunk by the Holy Spirit. In other words, be controlled by the Holy Spirit. You want to imitate God? You can't, but the Holy Spirit can in you. Let him do it. And one last thing I'll say about that, and hopefully you don't know this, but if you want to stay drunk, you got to keep what? Drinking. You don't have a drink and get drunk and then it wears off. You got to keep, I'm not telling you to go home and do that, by the way. I'm just saying that's how it works to stay drunk. Same thing with the Holy Spirit. It isn't a walk the aisle one day, poof, I'm good to go, repent, give my marriage to God, it's all up. No, it's a daily, minute by minute. I got to keep drinking of the Holy Spirit of God, who doesn't leave. He lives right here, but allowing him, what Ann just showed, to be in control, on the front seat. He's driving my life. I'm surrendering to him. I'm becoming the husband he wants me to be, the wife he wants me to be, and living out this thing. So with all of that as the sort of the foundation and the context, he then says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. We're going to talk about that in a second, okay? That's husbands, how do you love your wives? But then at the end of the very last thing he says, as sort of a summary statement, I'm guessing this is where you got that answer and others, that the number one need of a man is respect. He says, however, each one of you, talking to the husbands, must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Verse 33. It's this summary statement of all he said. Okay, I'm just going to summarize this. Husbands love, wives respect. Now, isn't it interesting? He doesn't use the same word. Husbands love, wives love. Or husbands respect, wives respect. He could have, but I think here's what I believe. I hope you believe the same thing. I believe the Word of God is inspired by the Holy Spirit. It's written precisely. Words were very carefully chosen by God through human authors to write these. I think God is getting at something like the number one need of a man is respect. Number one need of a woman is love. Now, am I saying that women don't want to be respected? Of course they do. It's a big need for women just like it is for men. Am I saying men don't want to be loved? Of course they want to be loved. But he's getting at something that's sort of core in the male and core in the female. And he's not saying it's different, but it sort of is. And most of us are shaking our head going, yeah, I've seen men and women are different, right? Not just physically. Like most of the time we're just different physically. I'm talking emotionally. We are wired differently. Am I right? Yeah, completely. And so this respect love thing is really interesting. So let's talk just for a second about how to respect your man. Okay? And I'll share a quick story that Ann would share if she was here, but I'll just share it in her place. She was asked, decades ago, to speak to the Mothers of Preschoolers group at our church. And like the day before, she goes, hey, you should come with me. The women probably like to hear a man's perspective. I go, okay. And she goes, what do you want to talk about? I go, I don't know. I'll just be there and I'll just be color commentary. So we get there, and there's 400 or 500 women in this room, and she's doing this thing. She goes, hey, Dave, you have any thoughts? And I literally had not really thought about what I wanted to share, and here's what came out of my mouth. I'll never forget this moment. And I got pretty animated. We were sitting on stools, and I said, hey, ladies, I don't know if you understand this or not, but when we are little boys, your husband, every man, when we're little boys, there's usually somebody in our life that's sort of cheering for us. You know, it's like our mom or a teacher. And as we grow up and figure out what we're sort of good at, you know, those people that are in our lives, that maybe it's athletics, you have a coach saying, or, you know, I was a musician, so I had music teachers saying, hey, David, you're good. There's somebody usually cheering for you in your life. And then, you know, you get older in teenage years in high school and you figure out what you're really good at. And, you know, I found out I was an athlete, and so I had people cheering for me. And then I got to college and I was on a scholarship to play quarterback, and there's thousands upon thousands of, it was Ball State, so, you know, maybe 30,000, you know, cheered for me, but I remember it like 100,000. Anyway, so, you know, you find out real good. And so I'm doing this whole thing, and Ann's sitting over at a stool, and we've never talked about this, and I've never really said this. And as I was saying, I was like, hey, this is coming out like good. And then I finally say this, I go, and then, you know, I met Ann, and basically she is saying, of all the men in the world, Dave Wilson, you're the man. I choose you. And so she's like cheering for me as well. And I go, it's this awesome thing. And I look over at Ann, she's like smiling, like, yeah, that's a good thing. And then I said this. And I go, and then we get married, And we're married for a few years, and we come home, and we walk in the house, and all we hear is, boo, boo. I don't know where, I just said it. And when I was doing that, I was like, that's what it feels like. And as I'm doing that, boo, I look over, and Ann is literally on the stool like, I mean, she goes like, what? Because we have never talked about this. And, it's one of those moments where you're like, oh, no, this is going to be a long drive home. And she literally looked at me like, what are you talking about? And when I said it, I was like, that's what it feels like. And, part of it probably is because I'm a guy who's on the sideline with the Lions for 30 years. I was there 0-16. And it was boo with bags on their heads. You're protecting yourself. They're throwing stuff. It was just bad. And so it was a way that, and I had felt that. Ann's never literally booed me, but I had often felt that. So we get in the car. I am not kidding. We get in the car, and she's like, what was that? You think I boo you? I don't boo you. And I remember saying, I go, well, you don't boo me, but it feels like that. Here's literally what she says. I'm not booing you. I'm helping you. She said that. And she goes on, I'm helping you. She goes, everybody out there, they don't know the real you. They're like, oh, you're so amazing. But I know the real you, and I'm helping you. And I remember looking at her and go, well, it doesn't feel like help. And she denies it to this day. If she was here right now, she would say, I said to him, I'm like the Holy Spirit. And I say, no, you said, I am your Holy Spirit. That's what you said. And we get in a fight every time we talk about this. But she said something like, well, I'm God's using me to help you. And when I sort of boo you, I'm making you better. And here's what she would tell you. And I think so many women can relate to when she says this. She would say, well, if I cheer you, that means I'm satisfied, and it will enable you to think you're good. So I don't cheer you, I critique you to motivate you to change to be the husband I need. That's what she would say. And that's what she did. And all I know on that drive home, all I remember saying is, I know you may mean well, but it doesn't feel like you even like me. And so here's what's really interesting. Is she said, and she would tell you this, she then, when we got home, she went upstairs. And she shut the door and went in her room, and she said, God, do I boo Dave? If she were here right now, she said, she felt like God said, yes, you do. And I'm like, yay, way to go, Jesus. So, I mean, she felt like, and she said she heard God say, just listen to your words. Just listen to your words. We just did a little video a couple weeks ago about the power of words in a marriage. Proverbs 18:21. It's one of the 7 ways to ignite the passion in your marriage is your words. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. You can speak life, that's cheer. You can speak death, that's boo. And here's the thing. She felt like God said, listen to your words. And she said, I realize over the next week, I constantly am critiquing you. And I'm like, yeah. I felt it for years. It was like, you don't do this enough. Why don't you do this? Why are you doing that? I mean, I got to points where I'd be like changing a diaper, and I'm like, I'm terrible at this. I was like, get out of the way. I can do this better. And it just felt like she could do almost everything better. I didn't lead the family spiritually the way she wanted. And again, if she were here, she would say, yeah, I was very negative. I was always negative about it. You won't believe this. When we were having this discussion, which went on for months, right? I was on a trip with my guys that I do life with. I have 7 guys I've been doing life with for 20 years. One of them, my best friend, is Rob Houtland. He's a famous Iowa kicker. He's my best friend. And so Rob and I and some of the guys were on a trip. Listen to this. We're in a big van, and I'm driving, and I say this. Hey, guys, let me ask you a question. This is right when Ann and I are having a discussion. I said, do you guys feel like your wife loves you? And I know all their wives. I know all their kids. I've done all their kids' weddings. Every guy in the car, like, immediately, of course, yeah, she loves me. I go, okay, next question. Do you feel like your wife likes you? You ready for this? Every guy in the car, nope. I'm like, what? She loves me. She's not going anywhere. No, she doesn't like me. She's always trying to change me. She's always critiquing me. She's very dissatisfied with me. That's just marriage. I'm like, wow. And then, they're like, why are you asking us this? You writing a book about this? I'm like, yeah, it'll end up in the book. But I just didn't know if what I was experiencing was common, and I found it's very common. So the only thing we say in this thing, I wrote it down this way, all men want a cheerleader. You know, and it's just a phrase, you know, we long for our wives, you know, to be our cheerleader. We long for you, our woman that's chosen us to say you're the man at one point, to keep saying that. And I know some of you are sitting there going, yeah, but he isn't the man anymore. He was. If you knew my man, you would know that I can't cheer because here's what Ann would say if she was here. She would say, you saw something good, bring that back out. Because that's often what we do. We just critique and cut, and it doesn't make our man become the man he's called us to be. And respect, in some ways, is cheer. Cheer your man. I don't mean literally, although, you know, if he came home and you were wearing a cheerleader outfit, that'd be pretty cool too, but we'll talk about that after lunch. I'm kidding. Don't buy my book. Go buy a sweater that has a big anyway. But here's what I do. Ann created this visual again. One time when we were speaking at this years ago, you can tell we're much younger at our church, that, again, I didn't know what she's going to do. She goes, I got this visual in my mind to help women understand what we often do to men. And so I'll let Ann show you what this sometimes looks like.
And several years ago, I tried to illustrate it this way. It's almost this, we grow up as little girls, and then we get older, and we try to find the perfect man. And these plants will say today are men. And so we go into the market of single men, and we're like, oh yeah, this one looks pretty good. He's really nice. And
No, that one's a little taller. You gotta take that one.
This one right here?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and this one has lots of hair. Yeah, this looks good. Just kidding, honey. Just
That was
kidding.
me years ago. There you go.
I'm sure that he'll be awesome. And so we say, you are the man. This is one. Yes. Yay. Yeah, you. I choose you. There's nobody better than you. You are the man. And then we get married. And all of a sudden we're like, oh, what's that? Oh, it's a little brown leaf. Well, honey, let me help you with that. I don't think you realize, but you used to be a great communicator when we were dating. Well, now you're really not such a great communicator anymore, so you need to start talking more and communicating. Here, you need to fix, what's that? Oh, that's another one. Oh, I know what that is. What happened to the romantic days when we used to wine and dine and have these great romantic evenings? You're just like this clod now, and all you want to do is have sex. So what's that? And we get rid of that. And then we think, well, look at this plant. There's all kinds of flaws. This isn't even helping. I need to get something else to help myself. This will do the trick. And so we start thinking, honey, you really need some help, and I'm the one to help you because you're not romantic, you don't communicate, you never pray, you don't lead, you're quiet, you never give me what I need, and I'm so tired of it, and come on, meet my needs. And then we're done. Look at the man. And we're done, and you know what we do? We say, why can't you be more like him?
So, hopefully you haven't done that in your marriage, but, often that can happen. And so here's all I'll say before we spend some time talking about how to really love your wife, is I think there's like 3 cheer moves that I would give the women. Just three ways to cheer your man. And it's just simple. Notice, speak, desire. Notice means notice what he does well. Find him doing something right. Speak words of life, affirmation, cheer. And again, I'm not literally meaning cheer, but speak words of life to him. And that's the first 2. It's like notice, speak. Notice, speak. Ann would say this, man, if you're going to speak death words or discouragement or downgrade, zip it. Just hold it. She would say this. She often stops and says, God, should I say it? How should I say it? And it stopped her from saying many things. So it's like you know to speak. Desire, we're going to talk about after lunch, but there is a connection, I think, between sex and respect that often we don't always talk about or understand. That we'll save that for later. But all I can tell you is this, and I don't have time to develop it, but I can tell you this. After that day where I shared that story about I feel like you boo me, Ann started to change the way she spoke to me, noticed all the things I just told you. And again, it wasn't in a day or a week, but over months, and I say even over years, She became, and she is to this day, my biggest cheerleader. I am not kidding. She cheers me constantly. It's like if you were around her, you'd be like, wow, you really believe in your man. I feel like I'm the most amazing guy ever, and I'm not, but she just started speaking life. And I got to tell you, at first, I didn't buy it because she would say something like, you're a good man. You're really a good husband. I look at her like, no, I'm not. You've never said that. In fact, you've said the opposite. Like, why are you lying right now? And she's like, no, and she would be specific. And I said, I've been watching this and this. And here's all I know. And again, I think most men are like me, but maybe not. But here's what happened to me. I felt like I'm sort of this guy. I'm okay, but I'm not great. She started saying, no, you're this guy. And I'd be like, no, I'm not. No, yeah, you are. You're a good husband. You're a good dad. I love the way you lead the boys spiritually. I'm like, what? And so she started speaking life, and I'm here. Here's what happened. And many men are like this. When she said I was this good and I knew I really wasn't that good, I started to do this rather than this. When she would critique me and say, why don't you do this? Most men, you've probably seen it in other books, when they aren't respected, when they're disrespected, you know by two symptoms: anger, withdrawal. They respond in anger, and Emerson Eggert says you should step back and go, what did I do or say to make you feel disrespected? That's usually a sign. Or withdrawal is they just pull away, or they shut down, or they pull back. That's what I did. I just sort of stopped. All I know is this: when she started speaking life, I became a better man. I wanted to be the man she said I was, that I wasn't, but I wanted to be that I'm going to be if she keeps. It was just like, how does that work? All I know is I became a better man, a better husband, a better dad because she said I was, even though I didn't believe it yet, but it motivated me to be that guy. And again, I don't know how it works in your marriage, but I'm betting you it's going to work the same way. And so Ann said one woman came up to her and said, so I'm supposed to be like a Hollywood actress and just lie? Because no, he's not that kind of man. And Ann's like, see something good, call it out, notice it, speak it, and it's amazing. I'll tell you one last story, and then we'll talk about women. I was crawling in bed on a Sunday night after preaching 2 services Saturday night, going down to the team hotel and doing chapel for the team, preaching 3 more Sunday morning, going to the stadium and being on the sideline for another Lions loss, and coming home. That's my typical weekend in the falls in Detroit at that time. And so I'm exhausted. And I crawl in bed at 11:30 at night, and I say this to Ann. I said, man, I've been getting a lot of critiques lately on my sermons. We used to have these little cards back in the day when people had pen and paper that we called confidential request cards, which meant give us your prayer requests and we'll pray about them. You know what they became? Critique the pastor cards with no names, anonymous, whatever. Now it's comments on Twitter, but then it was, and so we're getting some of these, Dave, whatever. And so I said to her, man, I've been getting critiques on my sermons. And we're just laying in bed, the lights are out, just about to go to sleep. And she would tell you that the first thought that came to her mind, if she was standing right here, she would say, the first thought that came to my mind was, well, if you got in the Word more and studied more, your sermons would be better. She said, I almost said that. But she had learned to go, God, should I say that? Nope. Should I say something? Yep. What should I say? And here's all I heard. She says to me, like 30 seconds later, she goes, I can't imagine what it's like to carry the weight of thousands of people relying on your walk with God to help spur their walk with God. That's a heavy weight to carry. That's really hard. That's all she said. And I'll never forget this moment. I remember I just turned to her, and all I said was, you are my life. And I held her. And here's why I said that. And again, it was just spontaneous. I didn't think, hey, it was just, I felt like this. And here's the truth. When somebody comes up to a pastor or a pro athlete or anybody in the public sphere and says, hey, you're amazing, you're a good guy. You know what we think? Thank you, but you don't know. Right? So you don't know what I'm really like. You just see me here. And maybe I do what I do here good, but you don't know how I treat my wife. You don't know what sins I'm struggling with. You don't know what. So we just smile and say thank you. I've talked to thousands of pro athletes over the years, just sign the autograph and say, yeah. And they know they're a fraud. But when your spouse, women, do you understand this? When when Ann says to me, you're an amazing man, and she knows all the crap, but she means it when she says, I will follow you anywhere. I trust you. You're a good man. You're a good husband. You're a good dad. That carries so much weight because they can say it. It doesn't mean anything really. But when somebody that knows all the bad stuff says, I still believe in you and I still trust you and I am glad to still be married to you, your man becomes the man God wants him to be, and it creates a better man. I'm just ending with that to say, wives, you have such power to build up or destroy. And the last thing I'll say is you have that power with your sons as well. They long to be cheered as well, okay? All right, so women, you ready to go? And by the way, this isn't for the women now. This is for the guys. Guys, you're the ones taking notes now. The women know all this. They don't need to be told how to love them. They need you to understand how to love them. And we've got like 20 minutes, so I can do. Oh, we got like, okay, we might go a couple minutes over. But here's the thing: if a man longs to be cheered, here's what I would say: a woman doesn't just long to be loved. And I wish Ann was here to say all this, because what do I know, right? But a woman longs to be, I don't think love is the word. I think cherished is the word. So they're both C words. Cheer your man, cherish your woman. Cheer your husband, cherish your wife. Why do I say cherish? Because Paul says, husbands, love your wives. And of course, we're like, yes, but here's the thing. Do we know what love is? You want to know what love is? No, we don't know what love is. It's like we say we love the Iowa Hawkeyes, right? And we love ice cream. What's that mean? Right? I mean, it's just a word that's so used that it sort of lost its meaning. But when you say cherish to, especially a guy, and I know women do this too, we cherish stuff. You know what I mean? Because I'll read you a definition of cherish. Cherish. To cherish something is to care for it deeply, to treasure it, to hold it dear. Related words that mean costly and beloved. Now, the reason I say men often cherish stuff is we cherish possessions. Why? We take care of them. You know, we polish them. We talk about them. I mean, and I'm not saying women don't do this as well, but man, I tell you what, I was showing Anthony, your acoustic guitar guy up here. I go, here's my guitar room. And I've got like 6 guitars hanging on the wall. It's humidified because guitars and wood need humidifiers. So there's a special humidifier in there. They're taken care of. If you came to my house and said, hey, can I play one of those? I'd be like, no, you're not touching it. Are you a guitar player? Do you understand how to cover the belt buckle? No, you're not touching it. I've got a motorcycle. You're not getting on my bike. Are you kidding me? It's like we cherish, we protect because it's costly and beloved. We talk about them and stuff. Now, here's what I mean, what I'm going at. What would your wife feel like if she lived in a humidified room in your soul? Now, in other words, if you considered her costly, and I don't mean you spend a lot of money on her, although that makes her feel loved too, but I'm just saying, she is priceless in your life. You talk about her like you talk about your new car. I mean, better than that, but you talk about her because you're so proud and excited to show somebody who she is and what she means to you. That's cherished. Am I right, ladies? It's like love is that, but it's like, man, a woman longs to be the most important thing in your life. And I don't mean a thing, a person in your life is the woman sitting beside you right now. There's nothing more important except your walk with Jesus. Your kids are not more important. I mean that, and I just mean that for the women. They are not more important than that man or that woman. They're going to leave, hopefully, someday, and you're going to be left. We're empty nesters now, and I'm telling you what, if we didn't work on our marriage all those years, we would be very empty right now because there's no one in the house, and if you don't have this working, you're just empty. And I've seen so many empty nesty couples that gave their cherish and their love and their respect to the kids, and when the kids left, they have nothing, so it's worth fighting for. I'll read you real quick what Paul said in Ephesians 5. Husbands, listen to this. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with the water through the word. And I love what Paul does. He says, husbands, love your wives. Oh, what's that look like? Oh, let me show you. As Christ loved the church. Oh, you're not sure what that means? Let me keep going. He gave himself up for her. It's like, it's not about me. The second you marry, I want to say this to the husbands on day one. You know what you just signed up for? Death. And they look like, well, I don't want to die. Yeah, you got to die to yourself, to your needs, to your desires, to your agenda. It's not about you anymore. It's about laying down your life as Christ did for his bride, the church, laying down your life for your wife and for your kids. It's not about you anymore. I never knew that when I walked in to buy tennis shoes, I couldn't just buy what I wanted anymore. It's over. I got to buy shoes for the kids. It's like that's just a small assertion, but it's like my desires, my needs are secondary to hers and theirs. And that's what it means to love. He says to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with the water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church. What's he saying? He is saying that men, we are in many ways bringing out the spiritual life of our wife by the way we cherish her, bringing her closer to God by the way she is cared for by us. So here's all I'll do. I'll give you 4 cheer moves, all right? The guys only got 3. Women, you can cheer us, notice, speak, desire. Men, there's 4, and they all start with the letter T. Because if you're anything like me, you're like, just tell me what to do, dude. Just tell me what to do. And you'll be able to remember these 4 words very easy. And by the way, during lunch or tonight on your date night or whatever, you need to sit down and talk to your wife and say, is this what makes you feel cherished? It might be different for her because there's a million different ways that women feel loved. Maybe 2 million. And so your wife may be different. These are sort of Anne's ways, and they're pretty general and pretty common, but they may be different. And the first one's simple one, time. Just simply time. Spend time with her. One of the first things we heard at that weekend, that we went to, as an engaged couple, was Dennis Rainey, the president founder of Family Life, who I just replaced on the radio show. He said from the stage, he says, you need to date weekly in your marriage. I remember Ann and I sitting there as an engaged couple go, date? What do you mean date weekly? Of course you date. We didn't know that if you don't intentionally put it on the calendar, you will not date because there's other things it'll take. So your relationship needs time. Time. And I mean it. Start dating. It doesn't have to be this elaborate thing. It doesn't even have to cost a lot of money. It needs to be protected once a week. Put it as a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner, a movie, whatever it looks like. Figure out a way to get away from the home somewhere in Grinnell or whatever. Go to the hotel I stayed in last night, Hotel Grinnell. Wow, what a cool hotel. Just get a night out. And it doesn't even have to be an overnight, but do it once a week. And again, it's not a legalistic thing. If you miss, you miss. But man, put that in there. I'm telling you, that helps her feel loved. And on that date, here's the second T. Make sure you talk about the relationship. And you notice there's 3 A's in there because if you're like me, you want to talk. But if you're like Ann, you want to talk about the relationship, right? And so go out on the date and talk about your relationship, about your life. And here's one of the things we learned to do, and you'll hear this story later. But there was a moment in our marriage at year 10 where we almost ended up divorced. And in that very moment, if you would have asked me, how's your marriage on a scale of 1 to 10? I would have said, we're a 10. We're a guarantee a 9.8. I guarantee Ann agrees. And she would have said, we're a 0.5. And I had no idea. So one of the things I learned to ask after that 10-year moment when God sort of saved our marriage, I'll tell you about it later, is on our date, actually say, hey, scale of 1 to 10, what are we right now? And then I'll say, because here's what will happen. Her number will be lower than mine. And maybe that's true in your marriage as well. And then I'll say, okay, if you think we're a 6, I think we're a 9. We're not a 9, we're a 6. How do we get to a 9? She'll know. Just the way God's made women. They know how to do relationships well. I'm not saying men don't, but I want to learn from her and I want to grow with her. And so when we spend time and we talk, she feels cherished. And so that's something that is part of our rhythm. In our vertical marriage book, we said you should do 3 things. And here's what they were, and they're time and talk. Pray daily, date weekly, retreat annually. That was just one way of rhythms. And it's really, how do you increase your spiritual life? Pray daily. Once a week, Sabbath, rest. Once a year, go away to a conference, grow. Same thing's true for your marriage. What would happen? And I'm not telling you, when our vertical marriage book came out, thousands of couples around the company would direct message us on Instagram or Facebook, and they would say, the one thing we started doing we've never done is we started praying together daily, and I can't tell you how our marriage has changed. And we're not talking about a 5 or 10-minute, 15-minute prayer. We're talking about a short little prayer. And if you've never prayed with your spouse out loud, you're like, that's really uncomfortable. I don't think I'll ever do it. Here's a trial prayer. Just say this: God, help. Amen. And some of you are like, that's not a prayer. Oh, yeah, it is. I mean, if you never prayed out loud with your spouse and Jesus hears you go, help, you don't think he's coming to answer that prayer. He's like, he just asked for help. He hasn't talked to me in months. I'm moving toward that marriage. So it's that simple. And then date weekly, we just said that. Retreat annually. Guess what you're doing right now? You're doing an annual retreat. Do this every year. And I got to make a promise. I'm coming back, and next time I guarantee my wife's coming with me, okay? I feel like I owe you that. But you should do that once a year. It's great for men to do it, with women to do it, women's retreats, but it's really important for you to do as a couple. Then the last two are this. Touch. And here's what this means. And we're going to talk about this after lunch. But some of you guys just went, finally. Now you're talking about my love language. You're talking about sex, right? Actually, I'm not. And I hate to say this, but it's the truth. I'm talking about non-sexual touch. And if you're like me, when Ann said that to me early in my marriage, I'm like, what's that? There's touch that's non-sexual. Of course we know what it is. It's affection. It's holding hands. It's kissing. It's not sex. It's real affection. And again, we'll talk about this after lunch, but I'm telling you, every woman in this room, and I mean 100% of the women are like, yep, that would make me feel loved if you touched me in a way that wasn't sexual. Now, it can lead to sex. Wonderful. Awesome. But it doesn't have to, and it honestly shouldn't many times. Just touch me like you did when we were dating. And when I say we were dating, hopefully you weren't having sex, but you were touching all the time. If you were like us, like get your hands. We were fighting not to touch. And then you get married, and you know how many married couples never kiss? They don't kiss, except bye, see ya, home. That's not touch. Like when's the last time you made out in the kitchen? And that was it. I know you're like, gross. Yeah, well, I don't know if it feels gross to you, but it'll make her feel loved if it didn't lead to sex. It's just, I love you, and I want to hold you, and I want to embrace you, and I want to touch you non-sexually. And then the last one, and it's so key, and it's just the word truth. And what I mean by truth is lead her in the truth of the Word of God. I don't know if there's another T word, but that's the one I came up with. It's like when Paul talks about loving your wives in such a way that they are holy and unblemished, spiritually washing them, he's talking about a spiritual dynamic in your marriage that we as husbands initiate and lead. And it doesn't mean our wives don't lead. My wife is incredible, probably a stronger leader than I am, but I know God has called me to initiate. And sometimes it's this simple. Hey, let's open the Word together. Sometimes it's simple. Let's pray. And we pray together daily. Sometimes on our knees at the foot of our bed. It's just something that's a part of our marriage. And I don't want her always to initiate that. It's on me. And here's what I've learned over 41 years of marriage. She feels loved when I bring Jesus into our marriage. It's that simple. Just initiate and bring Jesus into our marriage. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken at churches, and I'll be saying, hey, turn to this passage, especially back in the day when people carried real Bibles, those things with paper and, words, now it's on our phone. But I'd be up there in the pulpit, and I'd see this. I'd see a husband and a wife, and I'd see the wife open the Bible, turn to the passage, and then slide the Bible over to her man. Like, you're supposed to be the leader here, so here you go. And I've never said this, but I want to go, what's going on there? And here's probably what's going on. He doesn't even know where that book in the Bible is because he doesn't read it. She does. But he's supposed to be like, and so that's what I'm like, guys, let's just step up and lead just a little bit. And I'm telling you, there's a benefit. Your wife feels cherished. Am I right, ladies? There's something I can't even explain that happens. I'll end with this. Decades ago, when our boys were real little, I said to Ann on New Year's Eve, hey, I'm making a New Year's resolution. After we get the boys down to bed, and we'd pray with them and do devos and all this little stuff. We're trying to raise warriors for Christ. It's in our parenting book what our goal was, so we're doing that. I just said, this isn't your New Year's resolution, but mine is. I'm just telling you, if you want to join me, you can, but you don't have to because it's my resolution. We're going to get the boys down to bed. I'm going in my little upstairs office. I'm going to get on my knees, and I'm going to pray for their wives. I'm going to pray for them as high school young men. I'm going to pray for them for a couple minutes. You join me, great, but don't have to. That's my New Year's resolution. And I knew I wouldn't keep it perfectly, but I want to make a resolution. Long story short, I'm like 17, 18 days in. And by the way, every single night, and we didn't keep this up forever, but 18 days in, every night, guess who's right beside me? Never missed a night. She was loving this. I didn't do it for that, but she was loving it. It's like, my man, we're praying together. So I'd pray this little prayer. She'd pray. We'd go downstairs. And by the way, it took a minute, 2 minutes. And let me tell you, you know what it's like to be the pastor and the dad at their weddings and looking at these brides and knowing I've been praying for them before they were even born? Amazing. So anyway, this like day 18 I'll never forget. I pray, she prays, getting off my knees, and she grabs my arm, my left arm. She's right beside me. She just holds it and won't let me up my knees. So I look at her, I go, what? She goes, well, I don't know how to tell you this, but this is like a turn on. That's what she says. And I look at her like, what? She goes, yeah, I mean, praying with you every night like this is so romantic. This is so romantic in our relationship. There's no other way to explain it. It's just like a turn on to me. And I didn't say this to her, but I'm looking at her. She had that little twinkle in her eye. I didn't say this, but here's my first thought. I thought, if this is how this works, I'm going to become the Apostle Paul. That's what I thought. It was just this funny moment. And again, I'm not saying that's why you talk, touch, and be one of the leaders in the home spiritually with truth. That is not why. But I'm telling you, and I know I'm not speaking for every woman here, but something happens in the soul of your wife when she feels cherished like that. Am I right, ladies? I mean, again, it's going to be different for you individually, and you can talk about that even now over lunch, but something happens when they are loved like God created them to be loved by their man, when he is cheered or respected by his wife as God's called him to be a man. We become the man God wants us to be. We become the wives and women God wants us to be. And again, I'm not trying to create some perfect picture of marriage, because there's going to be struggles and there's going to be fights about this. But when you sacrificially say, it's not about me, it's about him. It's not about me, it's about her. And you ask Christ to give you the power to do what you can't do. We've already talked about that in the last session, surrender. And that's constantly over and over. God, fill me, empower me with your spirit. I want to be drunk with your spirit, controlled by you. Make me the man that imitates you to be that husband, to be that wife. That's a marriage that your neighbor someday may knock on your door and say, okay, we need what you got. Not even knowing what it is, and you know it's Jesus. So let me pray for you and let's go to lunch. Father God, thank you for the time we've had here. And Lord, I know we're in so many different places in our marriages, and you know. And some of us are in good places, and you're just going to make it better. And some of us are really, really hurting. So I pray you meet us right where we are, even over lunch. I pray for conversations that would go deep and make progress toward us becoming the husbands and wives you've called and you've empowered us to be. So God, be with us and lead us and change us. In Jesus' name, amen.